liberty or give me death. This was the clarion call of the protesters behind the Tiananmen Square movement in China. And Beijing erased these protests from its history with a violent crackdown. But the people of China have not forgotten the slogan. It has now made a comeback. Recently, it was seen on the streets of Beijing. A silent protest is underway against Xi Jinping and against a zero-COVID policy. The people of China are going to unprecedented lengths to make their voice heard. This week, a Chinese think tank also backed their demand. It issued a rare report criticizing Beijing. This think tank warned that the Chinese economy will stall if zero COVID is allowed to continue. Like we said yesterday, dissent is rare in China, especially against Xi Jinping. So far, we've only seen isolated protests, but the growing pushback is now snowballing into a big headache, a big issue for the Communist Party. The Chinese state has launched a crackdown to contain the situation. On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you about the growing dissent against the Chinese president. One of Xi Jinping's worst fears is coming true. Today, the countdown for his coronation was supposed to begin. The Communist Party will hold its Congress next month. Xi Jinping is expected to be reappointed for a rare third term, but recent events are overshadowing his big moment. The Chinese president is losing his grip on the narrative. A perfect storm has hit his government. He could be facing more dissent in the party. Yesterday, we told you about a protest letter that targets Xi Jinping. Within 24 hours, we can tell you about another dissent note, another critique of the Chinese president and his policies. This one is about the zero COVID policy of China, the sweeping lockdowns, the mass testing rules, all of it. Here is the report that we're talking about. The criticism comes from a think tank, the Anbound Research Center. It has been linked to the Chinese government in the past. It published a research paper and it had to take it down. It's no longer available on the Chinese internet, but we were able to access some excerpts. And this research paper sounds like a warning for China. It asks the Communist Party to give up zero COVID. The title of the report is a giveaway. This is what it says. It's time for China to adjust its virus control and prevention policies. Let me quote with more details of what it has said. China's economy is at risk of stalling due to the impact of epidemic prevention and control policies. Preventing the risk of economic stall should be the priority task. China needs to focus on economic recovery and gradually integrate with the world. Basically, it says zero COVID is hurting the economy. The report makes a recommendation. It says China should learn to live with the virus. And there are specific references to the West. The easing of the pandemic restrictions in the US, Europe and Japan. The report talks about all of them. And it says that these economies are doing much better after opening up. You can't argue with the logic of the report. But if you're the Communist Party of China, you can erase the report. It was published on Sunday. It was available on popular Chinese social media websites. But by Monday afternoon, all posts were gone. Why were they scrubbed? And by whom? The think tank has not said a word yet. But this episode is extremely significant. It marks the second instance of dissent within a week, and that's a lot by Chinese standards. The timing raises more questions. Has zero COVID divided the Communist Party? Has it given voice to the silent dissenters? There's reason to believe it has. There is anger in China, and the writing is on the wall, quite literally. Let me show you some photographs. These are from China's capital city, Beijing. What you see are testing booths. They used to conduct mass tests. Now take a closer look. You'll see graffiti. Chinese citizens are defacing these testing booths. They've left some messages behind. This is what it translates to. Stupid prevention control. Give me liberty or give me death. And that's very significant. Give me liberty or give me death. Does it ring a bell? Well, for the Communist Party, it does. It brings back past horrors. This slogan was last used in 1989 during the Tiananmen protest. The only mass protest for democracy that modern-day China has witnessed, a protest that the Communist Party crushed violently, "Give me liberty or give me death," was used by the students who participated in the Tiananmen protest. At least 10,000 people were killed in that crackdown, and now that slogan is back on the streets of Beijing. Needless to say, the graffiti was erased within hours. But how do you erase a people's protest? How do you censor anger? More testing booths were defaced, in this case at least 8 of them. A single Mandarin character was spray painted. It's like a cipher on each booth. The symbol alone makes no sense, but put them all together and you get the message. A non-profit organization did it. It managed to crack the code. It plotted these symbols on a map of Beijing. When you read them together, this is what it says. "It has been 3 years. I'm already numb." The people of China are tired and frustrated, and this zero-COVID policy is testing them further. But the Communist Party has been unrelenting. Xi Jinping's word is the law. Chinese officials have issued fresh orders. They put millions of people under lockdown. The province of Hebei announced a lockdown today. How many people are affected? Almost 4 million. Shenzhen has tightened its curbs on movement. At least 9 million people are affected here. In Dalian, 3 million people are under lockdown till Sunday. Mass testing has been announced in Tianjin. More than 13 million people will be forced to give a sample there. And it's not just the people of China. Government officials are also at the receiving end. The Communist Party is blaming them for the outbreaks. They are being punished left, right and centre. So far, Beijing has taken action on some 51 local outbreaks. More than 4,000 officers have been punished. What kind of punishment? Anything between disciplinary action and sacking. This coincides with another crackdown. You may remember these protests. Last month, hundreds of bank depositors in China clashed with Chinese authorities. These people lost their life savings because of bank failures. These depositors are said to have been victims of a fraud. And now hundreds of people have been arrested in the same case. Some depositors have also been given compensation. A total of 234 suspects have been arrested. 234 suspects. What do you make of all of this? These crackdowns. The Communist Party is implementing what is called the law of the hammer. American psychologist Abraham Maslow wrote about this in 1966, and this is what he said. If the only tool you have is a hammer, it is tempting to treat everything as if it were a nail. Well, that's how Xi Jinping operates. Anything that goes against his worldview is seen as a threat. Any word of dissent or disagreement is seen as a challenge to his position. Xi Jinping's default response is a crackdown. The latest round of lockdowns and arrests fit that description. The entire Chinese state has been deployed to calm the insecurities of one man.
There are police officials, there are rescue officials wearing their life jackets. The government by and large is helping people being relocated to safer spots. What you see behind me is all water.
Have you noticed a trend recently? We use the word unprecedented a lot more, mostly while talking about the climate, and there's a reason for that. Earlier, our climate was stable. You could predict the frequency of rain or the intensity of cyclones. Now it's anybody's guess. Climate change has supercharged our climate events, and the result is this. Every week, there is something unprecedented. Like the floods in Pakistan. Words cannot describe the scale of destruction there. Only pictures and numbers can. Almost 33 million Pakistanis have been affected by these floods. 500,000 are living in temporary shelters. More than 1 million homes damaged. 3,500 kilometers of road submerged. 162 bridges damaged and more than 1,100 people dead. Pakistan's government says the losses could top $10 billion. What led to the scale of destruction? Supercharged rains. Pakistan received its highest rainfall in more than 3 decades. The rivers burst their banks, the urban drainage systems overflowed, and the result is on your screen. Almost 1/3 of Pakistan is flooded. These pictures should give you an idea. Most houses are partially submerged in water. The agricultural fields are completely destroyed. In the province of Sindh, 40% of the cotton crop is gone. 40%. Wiped out by the flood waters. Pakistan has deployed both the army and the navy to tackle this crisis. Their helicopters are shuttling across the country to rescue stranded civilians. This operation was caught on camera. Take a look. That was just a sample. Dozens of civilians are still stranded across Pakistan. Rescuing them is the first priority. Housing them is the second. Almost 500,000 people have been shifted to temporary shelters like this one. You can imagine what the facilities are like. No drinking water, no sanitation, and a daily hustle to get some food.
We don't have drinking water. All the pipes have been destroyed. An electric motor is also broken down. Nothing is left. What should I do? My children are facing hunger and the scorching sun.
People send relief goods here, but the distribution is not well organized at all. There are routine shuffles here and people have to fight to get some food.
Fighting for food. That's what it has come to in Pakistan. What the country needs immediately is aid, and a lot of it. So far, individual countries have stepped up to help. The UAE sent 3,000 tons of food supplies. The United States has pledged $1 million. China has sent 25,000 tents and $300,000. The UK announced $1.7 million. The European Union, $1.8 million. Besides this, Turkey and Qatar have also sent supplies to Pakistan. And I know it sounds like a lot of money, but look at the scale of this tragedy. Chances are these pledges will not be enough. So the United Nations is organizing a flash appeal for Pakistan. They're looking to raise $160 million. Where does India figure in this process? On Monday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi tweeted about the floods in Pakistan, and this is what he wrote. Saddened to see the devastation caused by the floods in Pakistan, we extend our heartfelt condolences to the families of the victims, the injured and all those affected by this natural calamity, and hope for an early restoration of normalcy. The Prime Minister did not mention aid, but reports say discussions are on. The government of India is discussing the possibility of extending assistance to Pakistan, and there is precedent for such a move. This one's not unprecedented. In 2010, India gave assistance for the deadly floods in Pakistan. Before that, in 2005, after the earthquake. But under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, this would be a first. There are also reports of Pakistan importing vegetables from India. Remember, Pakistan downgraded trade ties with India in 2019. This was after the abrogation of statehood for Kashmir. But under the circumstances, things could change. Their finance minister said the idea was being considered. Their foreign minister denied the report. So mixed signals at the moment. Whichever way you look at it, one thing is clear. It's going to be a long road ahead for Pakistan, long and painful, because the floods are just the start. What comes after it is equally difficult. The rebuilding, the diseases, the infections, the food crisis, the water crisis, all of it will take a toll on the Pakistani economy. The question is, can they handle it? Well, there was some good news for Pakistan last night. The International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, approved a bailout package for them. $1.1 billion will be released soon, but that alone will not be enough again. Pakistan's economy was already suffering before the floods. Their inflation was at 25%. Foreign reserves were down to $7.8 billion. Trade deficit was at a record high. So chances are these floods could be a knockout blow. Which brings us to the root cause of it, climate change. This level of rainfall is simply not normal. I have some numbers for you for perspective. Pakistan's monsoon was 780% more than average. Imagine that, 780% more rainfall. Some places received 14.8 inches of rain in one day. To give you more context, 14.8 inches is 3 times the national average. Pakistan is the best example of the looming climate catastrophe. First, they experienced rising temperatures. You may remember the heat waves in the months of April and May. That set the ground for these rains. You see, warmer air retains more moisture, almost 7% more per degree Celsius. And where do you think that moisture ends up? It comes down as rain. And remember where this is happening. Pakistan was never an industrial hub. Their contribution to greenhouse emission is just 0.4%, and yet they're suffering the impact. Tells you how urgent the climate crisis is. It doesn't matter if you don't emit carbon dioxide. It doesn't matter if you are a net zero country. Climate change will come for you wherever you are. Does that mean Pakistan's leaders get a clean chit? Well, not quite. There were similar floods back in 2010. Nearly 2,000 people were killed. So ideally, they should have been better prepared this time, maybe built better drainage systems or halted construction near riverbeds. But Pakistan's leaders were busy with other things. Maybe this crisis will be a wake-up call for everyone, for Pakistan's leadership, for world leaders, all the shadow wars, all those proxy conflicts. In the end, none of it matters. The only priority must be the welfare of your people. And speaking of proxy conflicts, 2 decades of instability and interference have reached a tipping point in Iraq. On Monday, their capital, Baghdad, turned into a war zone. This is what it looked like. What led to these violent clashes? A surprise announcement by this man. His name is Muqtada al-Sadr. He's a powerful Shia cleric in Iraq. Sadr's political bloc was the largest in Iraq's parliament. They had 73 seats, but no majority. So in the month of June, his lawmakers resigned. They could not cobble up a coalition, so they hit the streets. But on Monday, Sadr dropped a surprise. He announced his complete withdrawal from politics. And the effect was immediate. Thousands of his supporters flooded the streets of Baghdad. They breached the presidential palace. They took over the private pool, very similar to what happened in Sri Lanka last month. But there was one key difference, and that was weapons. Iraq is home to dozens of armed Shia militias. Some of them are supported by Iran, some of them are supported by al-Sadr himself. Now, Sadr is a hardcore Iraqi nationalist. He opposes both Western and Iranian influence. So naturally, the militias clashed. Most of the violence was reported near the Green Zone. The Green Zone is a 10-kilometer area in central Baghdad. It houses important buildings like the presidential palace, the US embassy, the prime minister's office. On Monday, it turned into a war zone, the Green Zone. You could hear the rattle of automatic gunfire, loud bangs from handheld rockets and grenades. By Tuesday morning, 30 people had been killed. All of them were supporters of Muqtada al-Sadr. But who killed them? Maybe Iraqi armed forces or Iran-backed militias. In the chaos of yesterday, it's really hard to say. The army had announced a nationwide curfew to control the protest, but it was squarely ignored. Protesters kept pouring onto the streets. Neighboring Iran closed their borders with Iraq. Multiple carriers suspended flights to Baghdad. The fear was it would be a full-blown civil war. By Tuesday noon, Sadr took to the airwaves again. He gave his supporters 60 minutes to withdraw.
I still believe that the party is disciplined and obedient. That's why, if within 60 minutes you don't withdraw from the Green Zone, even from the sit-in outside Parliament, then I will disavow you along with my party.
60 minutes is what he gave them, and guess what? It worked. Within minutes, his supporters vacated the Green Zone. The Iraqi army lifted the nationwide curfew. It makes you wonder, was this the plan all along? A show of force, a demonstration of his public support? Well, if it was, the plan worked. Let me show you a tweet by Mustafa al-Khadimi. He is the interim Prime Minister of Iraq, and this is what he wrote. Muqtada al-Sadr's call to stop violence is the epitome of patriotism and respect to the sanctity of Iraqi blood. You see what I mean? Monday's events have confirmed who is the real sheriff in town, who controls the streets of Baghdad. It is Muqtada al-Sadr. and that gives him a lot of leverage in the future. He could re-enter politics. He could take on an advisory/religious role, and he could pull the strings from behind. Which is why it's important to understand what his ideology is. What does Muqtada al-Sadr stand for? He hails from a very powerful clerical family. Both his father and father-in-law are ayatollahs, but his support base is quite the opposite. Most of his loyalists belong to the poorest sections of society. Historically, they were shut out of politics, but under Muqtada al-Sadr, they have a chance. He gained popularity after the US invasion in 2003. He led movements against both American and Iraqi government forces. His objective? To create an Islamic democracy in Iraq. Sadr despises Iranian influence in Iraqi politics. He wants to keep the Iran-backed faction out of power. In fact, in 2017, he met the crown princes of Saudi Arabia and the UAE. It's safe to say we will hear a lot about this man. A lot more in the weeks and months ahead. Retirement or not, Muqtada al-Sadr is likely to dominate Iraqi affairs in the future. Even India will be watching the developments closely. After all, Iraq is the leading seller of crude oil to India. Around 17% of total imports come from Iraq. If the political crisis worsens, that trade could be affected. But if Muqtada al-Sadr has his way, he could bring some much-needed stability to Iraq. What will that stability look like? As I say, only time will tell. For the moment, we'll focus on Ukraine, where there's a growing threat of nuclear catastrophe. Satellite images have shown something very serious. Damage in one of the roofs of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Ukraine has also launched a counter-offensive in Kherson. Now, Kherson is a Ukrainian city. It is currently held by Russia. Ukraine is trying to take it back, and it claims to have broken through several Russian defenses. Our next report has more.
It is day 188 of the Ukraine war, and the country is bracing for a nuclear catastrophe. You're looking at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. And this is the damage done to its roof. These may just be the first signs of a Chernobyl-like disaster in the making. Who's responsible for this damage? Russia and Ukraine blame each other. The nuclear plant has been under Russian occupation since March, but it is run by Ukrainian workers. Now, Ukraine says Russia is holding the plant hostage and even storing weapons there. Russia, on the other hand, blames Ukraine for the escalation. It says Ukraine's army is recklessly firing at the plant. Zaporizhia has 6 reactors, and it's the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe. So far, shelling has disconnected the plant from the local power grid. Zaporizhia also saw a partial shutdown earlier in August. Now, satellite photos show bushfires near the power plant. This comes at a time when officials from IAEA, or the International Atomic Energy Agency, are preparing for a visit to Zaporizhia. The mission aims to assess physical damage to the plant, evaluate working conditions, and check safety and security systems. The IAEA head says we must protect the safety and security of the nuclear facility. What about Russia? What does it have to say about the visit?
Мы надеемся, что эта миссия состоится, как это было согласовано и договорено. Еще раз повторяю, мы заинтересованы в этой миссии и давно ее ждем.
Russia has ruled out vacating the power plant. Ukraine, meanwhile, has intensified its offensive in Kherson. This is a Ukrainian city held by Russia. Now, Kyiv has launched an operation to take back control of Kherson. This operation was launched on the 29th of August. Ukraine claims to have broken through several Russian defenses. Reports say the Ukrainian military has been able to recapture 4 villages in Kherson Oblast.
We're saying that the hottest news is yet to come. As of now, active combat is ongoing, and this combat needs silence.
Kherson was the first major city to fall to Russia. It is important for its agricultural production and its strategic value. Kherson borders Crimea.
The occupiers must know we will chase them to the border, to our border, which line has not been changed. Occupiers are well aware of it. If they want to survive, it's time for the Russian military to run away. Go home if you're afraid of going back home to Russia.
Will violence escalate? Should the world brace for another nuclear disaster? Where exactly is this war headed? We say it's anybody's guess.
Now, we've repeatedly talked about the race for Africa. We've talked about China, Russia and the US and how these countries are vying for influence there. But we rarely talk about Japan, and there's a reason for that. Since the Second World War, Japan has shelved its global ambitions. It is not interested in spheres of influence or foreign interventions. But Africa is an exception. Starting the 1990s, Japan has been focusing on African countries. Their preferred tool is the TICAD, the Tokyo International Conference on African Development. Think of it as a donor conference. The first edition was held in 1993. The latest one was held last week. It was hosted by Tunisia. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida was expected to attend in person, but unfortunately he contracted the Wuhan virus, so he ended up attending virtually. Kishida promised both political and financial support for Africa. He pledged $30 billion over the next 3 years.
Japan will invest a total of $30 billion in aid for development in Africa over the next 3 years in public and private sectors. First, specifically, we will promote the growth of green energy. We will launch the Green Growth Initiative in Africa and invest $4 billion in public and private sectors.
This money will be split into different avenues. $1 billion is earmarked for debt consolidation reform, $300 million to boost food production, and $100 million just for Tunisia, the host nation. Now, these are investments and aid. They're not secretive loans like China's. And that's one reason why Africa positively views Japan's leadership. Their projects focus on human development, on things like health and education, food production, green energy, disease prevention, something the president of Senegal also pointed out.
Almost 30 years after its launch, the Tokyo Conference for African Development continues to deliver on its promises with solid results in the areas of education and training, agriculture, health and water, to name but a few.
Compare that to China, investment-heavy white elephant, secretive loans and debt traps. That's what China gives you. More and more countries have begun realizing this. They're seeking safer alternatives to China, and that's where Japan figures. Their policy was perfectly summed up by former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. He said Africa is no longer an aid recipient, it's a partner for growth. Naturally, African nations appreciate that sentiment. Abe's successors have carried that policy forward, including Fumio Kishida. Let me quote from what he said last week. Japan reiterates its determination to redress the historical injustice against Africa of not being represented through a permanent membership on the Security Council. Again, an important commitment. Japan wants to put an African nation on the United Nations Security Council. It wants Africa to be on the high table of diplomacy. The question is, what's in it for them? As they say, there are no free lunches. So what is Japan getting in return? For starters, economic gains. Africa is home to 30% of all mineral reserves. It is also an emerging market for commodities, and Japan has an eye on both of them. In 2015, their total trade with Africa was around $24 billion. Compare that to China. China's trade with Africa is almost $254 billion. So Japan has a lot of catching up to do here. The second reason is political. Africa is home to 54 countries put together. That's a powerful voting bloc at the United Nations. It's also a divided bloc. Most African nations have refused to take sides in global conflicts, and that includes the war in Ukraine. Japan and the West are hoping to change that. They want Africa's support against Russia and China. Indications are there is progress. Let me quote from the Japan-Africa Joint Declaration. We take good note of the initiative for a free and open Indo-Pacific as announced by Japan at the 6th Donor Conference in Kenya. And that's one part. It also talks about Russia's war. We express serious concern about the situation in Ukraine and its impact on African and global economies. For neutral countries, that's saying a lot. I'm not saying African nations will dump China overnight and embrace the West. I'm saying Africa is looking for good bets. Like all countries, they want safe and transparent deals. It doesn't matter if it comes from China or America or Japan, which is why Africa is the next battleground. India too should take note of this conference. The last India-Africa Forum was held in 2015. Another edition was slated for 2020, but it was postponed indefinitely. Maybe it's time to revisit India's stalled African outreach. After all, countering China is not just a Western strategy. It is in India's interest too. Our next story is from Nepal. It has stalled the recruitment for Gurkhas into the Indian Army under the Agnipath scheme. Now, for the unversed, Gurkhas are soldiers native to Nepal. They're famous for their military prowess, and they've valiantly fought for the Indian and British Army. Every year, the Indian Army recruits thousands of Gurkhas into its ranks. But this year, Nepal says they won't join because of the Agnipath scheme, a scheme that India introduced recently. The scheme has set a 4-year term for a majority of new recruits. Nepal apparently has apprehensions about this provision. Our next report has more details.
They are said to be the fiercest fighters on the planet. Ferocious warriors who can guarantee you a win. Famous for their slouch hats and curved kukri knives. They have served many armies, fought multiple battles, and won numerous awards, including 26 Victoria Crosses. But this time, the Gurkhas are making news for a very different reason. Their refusal to get recruited in the Indian Army under the Agnipath scheme. On the 29th of August, the government of Nepal asked India to halt the recruitment of Gurkhas under the scheme. Why? Because it has apprehensions about the future of Gurkhas once they retire. Under the Agnipath scheme, also called the Path of Fire, India plans to enlist recruits only for a period of 4 years. After they complete this tenure, 25% of the batch will make the cut. India's intention is to modernize the military by keeping younger and fitter troops on the front line. So, what is bothering Nepal about this? The 4-year term for majority of recruits. Nepal says this condition does not conform with a tripartite agreement it signed in 1947, an agreement between New Delhi, Kathmandu and London. You see, in 1816, Nepal signed the Treaty of Sagauli with the British East India Company. This treaty gave Nepal sovereignty over its affairs and British the right to recruit Gurkhas into their army. In 1947, this treaty became a tripartite pact. It gave Gurkhas a choice to serve either India or the UK. The Gurkha regiments got split between the two sides. Since then, tens of thousands of Gurkhas have served in the Indian Army. Today, India has 39 Gurkha battalions, serving over 7 Gurkha regiments. Nepal says the Agnipath scheme could derail this engagement. It says the 4-year contract violates the 1947 agreement, that it could leave Gurkha cadets without jobs after retirement. So Nepal has withheld the recruitment process. The timing is crucial. In a detailed statement, the army has said, India is a large country. Our country is going ahead with the scheme as announced at the moment, and the government of India and the people of India have accepted this and they are going ahead with it. So at this juncture, this becomes just an excuse for them. We are not going to change these rules only for the Nepalese Gurkhas. Both Nepal and India have made their apprehensions clear. Will the two be able to find a common ground? Only time will tell. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Our next story is from Greenland. Its ice sheets are melting. They've been melting for quite some time, we know that. But now the impact is becoming more evident. A new report says Greenland's zombie ice, as they put it, ice doomed to melt, that zombie ice, could raise global sea levels by more than 10 inches. That's twice more than the previous predictions. What's worse, scientists say there is no way to stop this ice from melting. Here's more.
Located between the Arctic and Atlantic Ocean is the quaint island of Greenland. The largest island in the world, with the second largest ice sheet. Almost 80% of Greenland's landmass is covered by ice caps and giant glaciers. That's approximately 1.7 million square kilometers. This graph tells you how. Since 2004, Greenland has been losing 286 gigatons of ice every year. A gigaton is a billion tons of water, which is enough to fill 400,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Imagine the volume 286 gigatons of melting ice can occupy. Why imagine when you can calculate? According to a new geological survey, this melting ice could raise the global sea level by 27 centimeters or 10 inches. And in the worst case scenario, the sea level could rise as much as 78 centimeters or 30 inches. Next question. By when will the change in sea levels occur? Any time between now and the end of the century. And what impact will it have on our world? According to a 2022 sea level rise report, in the next 30 years, sea levels on the US coastline could rise by 10 to 12 inches. And globally, it could lift sea levels by roughly 25 feet. The fallout would be precarious. High tide floods will become more frequent. Wetlands the world over would get inundated. Coastlines would destructively erode, and millions may lose their habitat. So what can be done to fix it? Nothing much. Scientists say there's no way to stop the ice melt, no matter the steps we take. Which basically means that even if we stopped releasing planet-heating emissions today, the ice is still going to melt. The only silver lining is the fact that we're aware of it. We can still minimize the damage with timely measures, like scaling up funding for climate adaptation and damage.
Our planet may be dying one ice melt at a time, but we humans want to live a long, long life. And we do all we can to extend our lifespan. We work out, we eat healthy, we try to go for regular health checkups. We drink juice, conduct health research on longevity. We even buy clean air, or what is sold to us as clean air. Like I said, anything we can to live a longer and healthier life. What if we told you that the secret to a long life is not in juice bottles, it is in an old brew? A study says tea may be the secret to a long life. This study was conducted in the UK. Researchers collected data from 500,000 men and women. So a good sample size, 500,000. They were all aged 40 to 69. About 85% of them said they drank tea regularly. You know what the study found? People who drank 2 or more cups of tea a day had between 9 to 13% lower risk of dying from heart diseases and strokes. The findings were published in the Annals of Internal Medicine. And here's the bit I found the most interesting. The researchers said that the result was the same regardless of whether you added milk to the tea or sugar, same with the temperature. In other words, tea supposedly helps you live longer, irrespective of how you drink it, with milk, without milk, cold, warm, with sugar, it doesn't matter. Most of the people in the study were drinkers of black tea, neither green tea nor brewed flowers, ginger or lemongrass, masquerading as tea. Also, like I mentioned, the study was conducted in the UK, so the results are relevant for a middle-aged white population, or the drinkers of the famous English breakfast tea. But what about the rest? Does it apply to us? Tea is the world's most consumed drink in the world after water, the world's most consumed drink. Turkey is the world's leading tea drinker. It is followed by Ireland, the United Kingdom, Russia and Morocco. Turks don't add milk to their tea, just a few cubes of sugar. In Morocco, mint tea is a symbol of hospitality. You may have seen videos of tea being poured into small glasses from a height. Well, that's how the Moroccans drink their tea. In Japan, tea is an art. There is a legit tea preparation ceremony. It is called chanuyu. It starts with the matcha powder being measured in what they call a chashaku, or a small ladle. The tea is then brewed in a bowl called the chawan. Water is slowly mixed using a handmade bamboo whisk. The ceremony focuses on the aesthetics, on the motions of the host who is making the tea. Taiwan is famous for its bubble tea. You may know it as boba or black pearl tea. It's an iced tea made with sweetener and tapioca. It is believed that tea was born in China. Traditional Chinese tea is sold in the form of tea cakes, also called pu'er. Chinese households believe in drinking tea in small sips, like fine wine. China is also the world's leading tea exporter. But what about India? Tea is hands down India's favorite drink. India is also the world's second largest tea producer. Around 80% of the tea grown in India is consumed domestically. Yet the per capita consumption is not as high compared to Morocco or the UK. Most Indians like their tea black or in the form of masala chai. A YouGov survey, a recent survey in India, found that 25% of the people feel that India is increasingly leaning towards coffee. Worldwide, though, tea from India remains among the most coveted. So what is it that makes tea, quote-unquote, healthy? Tea is high in what we call polyphenols. These are antioxidants. They've been associated with the reduced risk of cardiovascular diseases, diabetes and cancer. So coming back to the question, if tea is an elixir, does this apply for those outside the UK too? The recent research is not a one-off. Earlier studies in China's Tianjin Medical University found that people who consume 2 to 5 cups of tea a day have lower risk of stroke or dementia. But I'll tell you why we take these studies with a pinch of salt, why we should. Because very often these studies also have vested interests. We've not been able to find any links if this study was funded by a tea board or not. But that's very often the case. One day, a study claims green tea helps in weight loss. The next day, another study says hibiscus tea is rich in vitamins, or chamomile tea is good for your skin. Some cheer for matcha tea, some for spearmint tea, even the humble kawa. When the pandemic struck, Indians began drinking what's called kadha. It's a brew made of pepper, ginger, and basil. In some parts of the world, this drink would qualify as tea. But just like kadha, there was no real guarantee that tea is actually beneficial for you or that it helps you live longer. Studies are often as good as a chocolate teapot. I'll end by saying what I always say in such stories. Talk to your doctor before you decide what is and what is not your cup of tea. For the moment, we look at what else is making news across the world. This is Gravitas Global Headlines.
Germany and France warn against a European Union ban on tourist visas for Russians, saying it would be counterproductive. The Kremlin slams the ban proposal as irrational. Foreign ministers of Israel and Japan signed an agreement to step up their defense cooperation. The memorandum covers areas including arms equipment, technology and development, as they shared concerns about growing global tensions. German inflation rises again to 7.9% in August, as the soaring price of energy heaped pressure on households. Solomon Islands suspends visits from all foreign navies, citing a need to review approval processes after the U.S. Coast Guard was unable to refuel at its port. Hong Kong's High Court has upheld a new warrant obtained by the National Security Police to search the contents of jailed pro-democracy media tycoon Jimmy Lai's phones. Elon Musk makes a fresh fling to terminate his Twitter deal, citing new revelations from the platform's former security boss about security gaps and misleading account data. Gibraltar authorities said a cargo ship has been beached to prevent it from sinking after it collided with a liquefied natural gas carrier in the Bay of Gibraltar. A government spokesman said that the situation was under control and the ship was not in danger. The Mississippi governor has declared a state of emergency after excessive rainfall worsened problems in one of the state capital's water treatment plants and caused low water pressure through much of the capital city. World number 2 Cameron Smith becomes the highest-ranked player to join the Live Golf Series. The Saudi-backed series announced that the reigning British Open champion is among 6 new faces to have signed up for the circuit. The new recruits also include India's top-ranked pro, Anirban Lahiri. Serena Williams overcame a nervy start to reach the second round of the US Open and extend her farewell tour. The 23-time Grand Slam champion beat Danka Kovinic 6-3, 6-3 and will now face second seed Anett Kontaveit. There was a big upset in the men's draw as 4th seed Stefanos Tsitsipas crashed out after losing to qualifier Danil Elahi Galan.
That's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.
Oh, just cracking a beer early. Stop. 5. Genius use of the wigs there. He's wearing a wig.
You have entered the soul.
It's like the best spray tan ever, this, isn't it? Superb.